Namaste and greetings, and welcome to the Center for Spiritually Integrated Arts, a Centers for Spiritual Living teaching center. I'm Reverend Dr. Raymond Anderson, the founding minister and spiritual director. If you ever have questions about who I am, who we are, what we do, what is Spiritually Integrated Arts? What is a teaching center? What is Centers for Spiritual Living? What is metaphysical spirituality? What is New Thought? Science of Mind and Spirit? How do I become a member? How can I support, tithe, and donate? All of these questions and so many more. Send an email. You have two options. SIAADMIN, Spiritually Integrated Arts, admin at spirituallyintegratederarts.org, or spirituallyintegratederarts@gmail.com. Either of those will work. You can also visit our website, www.spirituallyintegratederarts.org. Now, you may be wondering, where else can I find and follow? There are several other social media platforms that you can also subscribe and follow. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and our YouTube channel, where you can also find all of our Sunday messages and more. I look forward to hearing from you soon. I look forward to you being a part of this beloved community. Because we are a virtual community, it doesn't matter where in the world you are. This can also be your spiritual community, because you can have more than one. Anywhere that you feel supported, anywhere you are spiritually fed is home, is community, is relationship. So I look forward to dialoguing more, conversing more, getting to know you. Much love and appreciation. Live long and prosper. Chat with you soon. Take care. Namaste and greetings. June, our next gathering on Zoom, which happens after the Sunday message, is June 25th. It is our opportunity to come together, to fellowship, to chit-chat, to simply connect with one another. If you do not already have the Zoom link, send an email to either of the email addresses you see on your screen, and the link will be sent to you. Now, keep in mind both of these email links, because these are the same email links that you send an email to for the Zoom link for the Wednesday night and the Thursday night gathering. Wednesday night is our Science of Mind and Spirit discussion group from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we discuss what is religious science, what is science of mind and spirit, how do I use it, how do I live it, how do I make it a way of life. And on Thursday night, from 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the study group that goes over and discusses the questions that I, Reverend Ray, share with you at the end of each message. Make note, because as of July 6th, that group will be meeting from 7 to 8:30. Remember the email addresses that I mentioned? Send an email to either of them referencing the Wednesday night and or the Thursday night if you want to join in either of these or both of them. Now, if you are ready, today's message, balancing grief and joy. Grief is an unavoidable emotion that we all go through at some point in our lives. We do not only experience grief when we lose someone dear to us. There are many other life situations that can cause and trigger grief as well. To embrace self-care in trying times, it is vitally important, it is imperative that we understand how to balance, how to surf through the waters of grief and joy. not simply grief to joy, but both and. Breathe. Grief. Grief is the response to loss. Now, it's important to understand that this loss doesn't necessarily have to be, as it says here, the loss of someone or something living that has died. Someone or somehow a bond or an affection that was formed is no more because of this person's death. Any loss, the loss of a job, the loss of closeness that COVID prevented. Remember, socially distanced. COVID created loss, loss of all kinds of things can trigger and stir grief. Keep in mind, as it also goes on to say, that although conventionally grief is focused on the emotional response to loss, grief also has physical, cognitive, behavioral, social, cultural, spiritual, and philosophical dimensions. Now, why do I mention that? Because traditionally we have been taught that grief fits into this neat little box. And we don't take into account that grief is not a one-dimensional thing. Grief is not a two-dimensional thing. Grief isn't even a three-dimensional experience. Grief is a multi-layered, multi-dimensional experience. In the same way that if you go to an orchestra or even a jazz ensemble, there isn't one instrument that is playing. For the musical piece that is being played, there are multiple instruments being played, and each has its own sound, its own rhythm, its own voice and way of expressing. So too is grief. Completely different layers, different voices, different expressions, different ways of showing up. So it's important for us, if we're going to learn how to balance this, if we're going to learn how to effectively live in, through, and around this experience, this painfulness to surf, then it's important to really understand how grief can affect us. In all of these ways that it mentions, there can be a physical, there can be a psychological, there can be a spiritual, a social aspect. There can be all of these, not just one, not just two. It could potentially show up as all of these. The more we know, the easier it is to address it and to heal. The easier it is to also then balance joy, which is the feeling and the experience of great pleasure, happiness, and love. The more we understand that, the more we can heal, the more we can balance, the more we can navigate effectively so that we are not suffering. We feel the pain, but we're also accessible for joy to show up. We feel the sadness, but we also are accessible for the laughter. We may feel lonely, but we are also accessible to the connection of support, therapy, family, something, someone, both and. So it's important for us to begin to explore, what is this thing called grief mean for me? How does it show up in my life? And not to take my experience and superimpose it onto yours and expect your grief to be like mine, to expect your joy to be like mine. I'm not like you, you're not like me. We are each an individualized expression of source. And in that expression, we are different. We are diversity, right? We are the demonstration of what that means. We are diversity in expression. We are the infinitude of all that and it's incarnating, it's individualizing as us. And even in that diverse, unique, we are still the one. We are still a unified oneness of Spirit of God, of the universe, showing up as. So why not celebrate it? Why should I try to make your grief, my grief, like my grief, sound the same, be the same? Because it's easier to compartmentalize rather than being present, not just to myself and the grief that I experience, but to be present while you grieve, because it's uncomfortable. So I want you to get over it rather than simply be present. Listen, feel, intuit, understand, breathe. Same image that was on the intro slide with the title and the intro blurb is me performing in Pittsburgh, and the sign, the American Sign Language sign that I am doing, is one of the signs that is used for such concepts as heartbreak, sadness, grief, trauma. Like, it can mean several different things depending on how it's being used. What does it mean for your heart to be broken? What does it mean to feel trauma, to feel sadness? What does it mean to be sad? What does that mean? Because oftentimes we say these words, we express these concepts, and we do so because we may not necessarily have the words to really say what we feel. So sometimes simply being present with the feeling is enough. We need not give it words. Sometimes simply be present and understand what it is that you feel. Where do you feel it? Why do we refer to this sadness, etc., as heartbreak? Is it the heart breaking? Why is it connected to the heart? Like, let's really explore. Why is it butterflies in the stomach, but it's heartbreak? Pause, contemplate, meditate. What does it mean energetically? Because the more we understand it, the more we are present with not just the concept, but the feeling and the energy of it, the easier it becomes for us to mend, to heal. Because your heart really isn't broken. It's a poetic term that we use to reference the degree of pain. And remember, grief shows up in all these various ways. It's not just in the space of the heart that there is heartbreak. Heartbreak, grief, sadness can also show up in your bowels as diarrhea or constipation. It can show up in your head as a migraine, in your neck as stiffness and aches. It can show up as all kind of fever. It can show up as all kinds of things, not just your heart. But we reference the heart because it's connected to love. But the moment we expand it beyond just the heart into the whole body, then we are able to understand that, wait a minute, that stiffness in my wrist, that nausea that I feel is also an expression of heartbreak, an expression of grief. We become more aware of the fullness of how this divine beingness can be present with grief. C.S. Lewis reminds us, no one ever told me that grief felt so much like fear. Whoa, wait a minute. We were just talking about grief and heartbreak. Now you're saying grief can feel like fear. Yes, and grief can feel like anger, confusion, apathy, physical pain, emotional pain, psychological pain, spiritual pain. pain in one's relationships, all of this, grief. So then, when you can understand, I feel confusion, and we may, I feel confused. COVID happens. My business and the separation, I feel confused. Do you recognize that that confusion is grief? The anger, it's grief. The isolation, grief. The low energy, grief. See, the more that we can name it and identify actually what it is, once again, the more capable, the more effective we are with moving through the process to be able to address it and heal it. For those of you who know me, you know that Steel Magnolias is one of my favorite movies. And I often reference this one particular scene as it plays out with grief. If you haven't seen the movie, I suggest you check it out. But let's review. There's a scene where Sally Field's character is in the cemetery after her daughter dies. And she goes through so much in this one scene. She says, God, I'm so mad. I don't know what to do. Anger. She wants to know why. There's confusion. I don't get it. She's lost. Why? And she screams out, God, why? She wants answers. She goes on, because I wish I could understand. Seeking, confusion. I wish I could understand. I need it to make sense, and it doesn't. Why is my daughter dead? I was supposed to go first, before her, not the other way around. I need an answer. Why? And then, no, I will not, no. She slips into denial. This can't be. This, it makes no sense. Because it's overwhelming. I don't know what to do with this. I can't take it anymore. Then she, right back to anger. I'm so mad. I just want to hit somebody. I want them to feel as bad as I do. And then her friends, specifically one, makes a joke about punching. When she says, I just want to hit something, one of her friends says, here, hit Weezer. Like half the town would love, to hit her. So hit her. And in that moment, the pattern of grief is offset. And joy, laughter comes back in. And then moving through, she is better able to balance. She has regrounded. She still feels the sadness. She still may be seeking answers, but she is now in a place of, and she can manage. She can balance, and she can move forward. Ernest Holmes says, memory is the storehouse of all my conscious thoughts, and it is active. Memory, pause, warning. It is important for us to be mindful that memory can be a dangerous thing. Memory can be the elixir, the intoxicant that makes us want to nostalgia, the good old days when America was great. And we get lost on the high of, the 70s. That was the best. Wow. The 60s were, man. Remember when? So yes, memory, storehouse, but be mindful of what are you storing? Because it is active. So what are you storing? How are you storing it? Because it's easy to store it in a way that is not life affirming. Now, another one of my favorite television shows. Still Magnolias was a film. This is a television series that is a offshoot of the Marvel universe and characters created in the Marvel films, Wanda Maximoff and Vision, who fell in love and watched the movies. But the reason this series is particularly important for us is because in this, Wanda is grieving. Now, truth be told, it's grief compounded with grief, compounded with grief. When she was a child, her parents were murdered, killed in a war, in an explosion. Compounded with, later, her brother. He's killed while they're fighting Ultron. Compounded again when Thanos comes and snaps and half of all of the universe vanishes. But Thanos, in order to snap and do this, he needs the Mind Stone that is in Vision's head. So he kills Vision to get the Mind Stone. And the really thing about that is, Vision didn't want Thanos to get the Mind Stone, so he wanted Wanda to destroy the stone, which would in effect, kill him. So he said, "You are strong enough to do this, and I would want no one else to do this other than you." He wanted the love of his life to end his life, to prevent the villain from ending life. And Wanda did it. She destroyed the Mind Stone and Vision died. And what did Thanos do? Thanos used the Time Stone to bring Vision back so he could snatch the stone and kill him. So Wanda had to watch Vision die twice. Once at her hand and then at Thanos' hand. Grief compounded by grief, compounded by grief. And there's a scene in the series where prior to all of this happening, prior to Vision dying, this is right after her brother dies, Vision says something to her, "But what is grief, if not love persevering?" We grieve because there is some element of love that is present. If there is no love, if there is nothing to miss, then why grieve? So we grieve because there is a feeling of loss. We grieve because we love. So in this grand scheme of things, when we come back to this idea, as Aeschylus says, the memory, once again, there's that word again, the memory of joy in grief is greater than every kind of pain. The memory. Well, what is the memory? The memory, if we look at the etymology, memory is the recollection, bringing together. I am collecting once again the concept, the awareness, the consciousness of, and I am bringing it to my present forefront of my mind. I am collecting the memory and bringing it to the forefront of my mind. So when there is grief, can I recollect? Can I bring the idea, the consciousness, the awareness, not just from the past, but what I am doing is connecting. Wait a minute, I have felt joy before. I can feel joy now. I have felt love before. I can feel love now. Why? Because now is all there is. And when I remember that I have experienced it, when I remember that I have had it, then I remember that I can experience it now, that I can have it now, that it is right here and right now. That is where the power is, right here and right now. And when we do that, when we elevate our consciousness and our awareness, then doesn't eliminate, the pain is still there, the sadness is still there, the grief is still there, but something else is also there. Breathe. In my life, I have often looked at the concept of pain grief, joy. And it hasn't necessarily been until relatively recently, that I have asked, how are my memories currently impacting and influencing the quality of my life right here and right now? Because in my life, there has been a great many things to grieve. Once my parents died, the house that I grew up in, I won't be there anymore. The childhood home, I grieve the loss. The family unit, my brother Jimmy was the first in this photo of my mom and her sons. My brother Jimmy is the one who's kneeling. He makes his transition. Then immediately behind him is my brother Leslie Gibbo, who made his transition. Followed by immediately to his right, my mother, who made her transition. I grieve that my brother next to her is a very fundamental Christian, very conservative Christian. We're not close. My brother Tyrone, my brother Smooth, we're not close. Now it's a different not closeness than my brother Eddie. That not closeness is because of the religious fundamentalism for the most part. But in general, the family, in terms of how I connect with them, I grieve. I grieve that my father made his transition and my father and I were so close. And it's interesting because not too long ago, Tracy and I were talking about the idea of, folks making a pilgrimage to see, visit Ernest Holmes' grave. And even though Ernest Holmes himself was like, I don't want people to do that, like, don't put me on a pedestal. And I mentioned, for me, there is no need for me to go to a cemetery. And yet, when my father died, every time Tracy and I would go to Pittsburgh, I would visit his grave. Not because I believed he was there, because I know there is an infinite allness and my father is everywhere. Everywhere God is, my father is, right? But there was the process of grief. And the process of grief meant that I needed to feel something closer to him. I don't know. I needed to be reminded that I got the gravestone. My father, my friend, my teacher is what's carved on his headstone. Because it was my connection to him. I grieve. And I remember the fun, the laughter, the joy. Even with my brothers and my mom, even amidst all of the alcoholism and all of the trauma, I still remember the moments of joy. So when my mom makes her transition during COVID, I grieve. I grieve knowing that whatever threads were holding me and certain family members together, the moment she makes her transition, that's gone. I grieve. And yet I am also able to be present to the joy and the laughter because my mother was silly as all get out. Tracy will tell you, Lois was a cut up, not to be trifled with, not to be messed with, because she'll tell you. So there were balances of, and I appreciate the fact that the mother that I had when I was very young and the mother that I had later in life, there was a reconciliation where we became friends. Didn't agree on everything, didn't see eye to eye on everything, didn't have to. We became friends. So I grieve. I grieve the American Sign Language cohorts and family that I had when I had STARS, when I had Believe, because that group is no more. I grieve not being able to perform American Sign Language the way I used to, traveling and going to amusement parks and the children's hospital and all of the things that we used to do. I grieve knowing that these relationships are only in memory for the most part now. I grieve that I have had mentors who were very instrumental in who I have become as an American Sign Language interpreter. And yet there is great joy for having these women in my life, for having their wisdom, for having their push. Because had it not been for Lisa and Jan, I wouldn't have done American Sign Language. Once I moved to DC, I would have been done. I'm like, man, I'm gonna find something else to do. But Lisa and Jan, they're like, if you don't get, these two women pushed me. Yes, you're going to make mistakes. So what? Get out there. You've got a gift. Share it. So when they died, when they transitioned, I grieved. I grieve that I am no longer a professional sign language interpreter. I grieve that my experiences with theater, the way they used to be, are no more. I grieve that I'm not an American Sign Language teacher the way I used to be. I'm not a public school teacher the way I used to be. Like, all of these things have shifted, have changed, have ended in many ways. Many relationships with skills, relationships with careers, relationships with people have changed. I grieve. I grieve the effects of COVID. I grieve the anti-Semitism that caused someone to go to one of the synagogues in Pittsburgh and kill people. I grieve Uvalde and the mass shootings of many schools over many years, churches, supermarkets, movie theaters, mass shootings. I grieve. I grieve the shootings that have happened in the gay community, at nightclubs, at events. I grieve that there are people who want to whitewash my history as an African American. I grieve that there are people who have made guns their fetish, who worship the gun rather than life. I grieve. I grieve relationships that have ended. I grieve that there are people that I didn't know personally, but I grieve the pain. I grieve their lives. I grieve the loss. And yet I am also joyful for the time that was given, shared. I feel joy for something that was gifted to me, whether purposefully or by osmosis, but there was a give and a take. I grieve and feel joy. I grieve my puppies that are long gone and that I had to leave them to move to DC, and that I never was able to get them or revisit them. I grieve. I grieve the loss of biological family that I'm not close with. They're still alive, but we're not close. I grieve family of choice that we're not close. We were, but no more. I grieve. I grieve that the relationship with my 5 sons has greatly changed. Some, it's not what it could be or what I would like it to be, and others, it also has ended. I grieve, and yet I am also joyful for what was. I'm joyful for the memory. I'm joyful for the gift that love has been afforded, and yet I still feel the loss. I still feel the pain. I grieve. I grieve that this recent surgery and other surgeries, that the body I once had or the body that I desired to have is no more. That body will never be the same body because parts have been removed. There may be things I will never be able to do again, but I feel the joy of knowing that there are things that I will be able to still do, that I can still live my life to its fullest, even with the discomfort and the pain, as I am currently still in the healing process. See, this thing called life is very much like walking a labyrinth, or very much like the symbolism of the Unalome, where you transcend, you spiral upwards, you move through life. And there are times when you're in the outer ring and like in this image, you pass that little bush that's in the corner from the outer ring, and then you go through and you go through and you go through and you circle that bush, you pass it again, but you're at a different point within the labyrinth. And you're going to pass it again, but you're at a different point in the labyrinth, because the whole point is you're getting closer and closer and closer to the center, closer and closer to the center of your being, closer and closer to that space and that energy of enlightenment. It's one of the reasons why the logo for this community, there's an unalome at the bottom of that A. That's what that is. And it represents that we are involved in this practice that is going to spiral, that is going to move, that is going to morph, and be honest and be real and be authentic in the process. Because once you get to the center of the labyrinth, you don't stay there. You walk back out, bringing the awareness that the center afforded you. And you take that awareness back out of the labyrinth into the world. And then at some point, you revisit and you go to the center. And then you come back out. You go to the center, that place where you know who and what you are. And then you bring that out. You bring that into the world. So our invitation is for real to approach this thing called trauma-informed care, trauma-informed spirituality, trauma-informed living. To be authentic and real in our grief, our anger, our frustration, our pain, and bring our spirituality and interweave it so that we are truly, in the most effective ways possible, healing. Not a one and you're done, I'm healed, but healing as an ongoing process. Breathing as an ongoing process. Eating as an ongoing process. We go in to the center and then we come back out, changed and transformed. But we go through the practice, we go through the process so that we are better able to live fully. Dr. Holmes says, right thinking brings new conditions. But what does he mean by right thinking? Right thinking simply is having your mental equivalents be effective. What is it that you want to experience? What is it that you desire to experience? Then make sure that your mental equivalent is that. And then live it. That mental equivalent is going to outpicture in whatever these conditions are. You want different conditions? Change the mental equivalent. You want different experiences individually? Change your individual mental equivalent. You want a different experience or different condition culturally? Change the mental equivalent of the culture. Keep in mind, there was a time when slavery was legal. It was government supported. Is it now? No. Why not? Because the mental equivalent of culture, of consciousness, changed. It evolved. So we want to change the cultural experience right now of bans, book bans, of drag bans, of legislation being passed for there to be non-gender affirming care, etc. We want those conditions changed so that there is equity and justice. Then we change the mental equivalent of the culture and the society, and that will change the condition, the experience of the individuals who are within that culture and that society. But we have to be present with our own mental equivalents. We have to know what it is that we are thinking, feeling, speaking, saying, doing. Because if you want a healthy, life-affirming balance between grief and joy, between love and laughter and sadness and pain and all of this stuff, it must be consciously cultivated and nurtured and consciously constructed. Not just simply crossing our fingers and wishing for things to change. If not me, who? If not us, who? If not now, when? Choosing to do it here and now. What is that old proverb that says, when is the best time to plant a tree? 30 years ago. When is the next best time to plant a tree? Right now. Do it now. Stop waiting for someone else to do it. Stop waiting for someone else to vote. Stop waiting for someone else to run for office. Stop waiting for someone else to speak at a school board function. Stop waiting for someone else to speak truth to power. Stop waiting for someone else to volunteer and serve. Stop waiting for someone else to write that book, to teach that workshop. Stop waiting for someone else to love you. Love you first. Be joyful in and of yourself first. Be free first. When Frederick Douglass says, I prayed for freedom for 20 some years, 25 years, but I didn't get it until I prayed with my feet. He couldn't have prayed with his feet if his mind hadn't been made up. If the words of his being were not already anchored and centered in freedom. If his emotions and his energetic feelings were not already in alignment with. There would have been no action in alignment with the mind, the words, the emotions and feelings. Action. Stop waiting for someone else to set you free. When you have the keys, when you can do it, set yourself free. Nancy Burns says, there is freedom knowing that you can carry joy and grief together. Knowing that it's both and, not either or. There is freedom in coming to the awareness that both and. As Thich Nhat Hanh says, sometimes your joy is the source of your smile, but sometimes your smile can be the source of your joy. One of these is expecting it from the external in. I need that to change before I can smile. I need that to change before I can love. I need that to change before I can be free. Versus, oh, no. I am free because I deem myself free. And from the inside, from the center, I am free. And then come back out and change the external experience. The civil rights movement, group of people who knew I am a man. I don't need you to validate me. I am. And from that I am, they marched, they voted, they protested, they attested. They lived, moved, and had their being based upon who and what they knew themselves to be. Same thing with Stonewall and the gay liberation movement, which now we know as the Pride movement of Pride Month. Same thing. All of this is about, I know who and what I am, and I will not allow you to rob me of that. Sometimes your joy is the source of your smile, and sometimes your smile is the source of your joy. Move past the either or concept of you're either grieving or you're happy and joyful versus both and. It's breath. Breathing is both inhale and exhale, not either or. Just an inhale isn't breathing. Just exhale isn't breathing. Both and. Life is grief and joy, happiness and sorrow, loneliness and togetherness. It's the full spectrum of all of these experiences. Breathe. Leo Tolstoy says, only people who are capable of loving strongly can also suffer great sorrow. But this same necessity of loving serves to counteract their grief, and it heals them. It heals them. The depth to which we are able to go to our center, to be present to all of it, heals not just us, but it heals the world. Because there is no us in isolation. There is only one mind, and that mind is God. There is only one life, and that life is God. And so when your life, your individualized expression of life is liberation, is freedom, is equity, is unity, it affects everything and everyone. And the more powerfully you can live that out loud, the more powerfully those ripples move throughout space and time. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin says, joy is the infallible sign of the presence of God. Joy is the presence of God. Joy. Where and when can you find joy? Where and when can you be joyful? Because when you exist in a state of joyfulness, joy finds you. Joy shows up. I don't need a reason to laugh. I am my own reason to laugh, as Tracy will tell you. Tracy often refers to me as the dog whisperer because, as the image in the middle shows, Tracy and Rainica, like there was a group of us, and we're in New York doing our New York thing, and this guy and his dog walk by, and the dog gets in front of me, and the dog is like, "Boop, it's time to chill," like right there in front of me, and the guy's like, "Wait, what? Like, wait, what are you? What?" And the dog wasn't getting ready to leave until the dog was ready to leave. Like the dog needed to be in my space. And we laughed and we joked about it and laughed and joked with him. And it was a moment of sheer and total joy. Joyful, joyful. Can you adore you? Are you willing to adore you? Tagore says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. And I awoke and saw that life was service. And I acted, and behold, service was joy. In other words, living, moving, and having your beingness in service to the world is what joy is. But you have to do it. If the goal is happiness, love, and health for self and others, then we must start being more compassionate and gentler with ourselves and with others. We can be in pain, and we can be healing, and we can feel angry, and still know that we are whole, perfect, and complete, and still embody that while feeling pain, grief, anger, frustration, and trauma. Living fully. Both and. Breathe. This week's declaration, our affirmation, if it resonates with you, then say it with me on the second go round. I now release all that no longer serves me, and I accept all that does, and I choose to embrace joy. Together. I now release all that does no longer, I now release all that no longer serves me. And I accept all that does. And I choose to embrace joy. One more time, since I flubbed up that. Come on. In 3, 2, 1. I now release all that no longer serves me. I accept all that does. And I choose to embrace and embody joy. And so it is, and so I do. This week's questions for you to do as an individual practice, and if you join the Thursday night group, here's your questions. What has the experience of grief been like for you as you have grieved and as you have been with others who have grieved? What losses, if any, are you currently grieving? And what are you doing to engage the process of grieving more effectively? Are you able to allow joy to be present in the process? What does an equilibrium, a balance between grief and joy, look like for you? How is ignoring grief counterproductive in self-care? How is it detrimental to your self-care? How can you be more joyful in times of grief? And lastly, what is the importance of balancing grief and joy? breathe. As we enter into that space of prayer, simply anchoring and acknowledging and recognizing the isness and allness of the divine. We breathe. And I breathe, recognizing that right here and right now, this breath that I am breathing, this breath that is breathing me, this breath is an amen. Because this breath is God breathing itself. This divine and holy Ruach Elohim, the breath of spirit, the spirit of God breathing itself. This breath is the amen. And because this thing called voice requires breath to send vibration through the air, then this word, this voice, is also an expression of that divine and sacred amen. And whether that word is spoken through voice or signed or written or typed, doesn't matter. It is still the amen, the aho, the ashe, the and so it is. It is still that. And so I speak this, I express this knowing that this thing called life is our amen. And that amen is an amen of joyfulness, an amen of balancing all of life's experiences to live fully and effectively, knowing that grief will show up. And yet there is also that which can balance, that which can soften, that which can ease the sting. The sting is still present, but there is also the laughter. There is also the love. There is also the oneness. And that is an amen in and of itself. And so I breathe this sacred amen. I speak this sacred amen. I live this sacred amen, knowing that this is the exact same amen that each one is speaking, breathing, living, being. Amen. And because the law is always saying yes, the law says yes to this amen. The law says yes to my amen. The law says yes to your amen. The law says yes to all of this. Amen. Amen that I embrace and embody joy. Amen. Amen that I balance grief and joyfulness. Amen. Amen that I am free to live out loud, magnificently and divinely. Amen. The law says yes. That means it's already answered. It's already done. It's already manifesting. It's already demonstrating. It's already here and it's already now. Right here and right now. And so it is. Namaste, blessings, much love and appreciation. Enjoy the rest of your day and your week in joyfulness and in celebration. And I will see you soon.